That's Steve Wynn from his new album, Make It Right. The Dream Syndicate leader has not only released his first solo album in over a decade, he's also written his memoir. Titled I Wouldn't Say It If It Wasn't True, the book and the album are out now. We found Steve at home in Queens, New York, and asked him what came first, the book or the record.
Really the memoir
Yeah,
is what was the first and foremost for me for the last 5 or 6 years. I've been working on it for a long time. And the record itself is like a companion piece to the memoir. It's that's I would say I don't want to say it's secondary because I put a lot of thought into it and care a lot about it. But the record actually was a collection of songs written and recorded during the time I was writing the book that I
right.
realized once I started putting them together fit the tone and subject matter of what I'd been writing. So, hey, they
Yep.
kind of fit each other pretty well.
Yeah, because I see you put out that box set, that decade thing, in 2020. Was that what got you thinking about writing the book?
Not really. I thought about writing a book for a long time, and it just let's face it, writing a book takes longer than writing a song. On a
Sure
good day,
does.
on a good day, and on a good day, and I pray for these good days, I can knock out a song in 10 minutes. That's a very good day, but it happens because you just get you
Right.
just, you're going as fast as you can. You're just feeling the inspiration, and you've written your verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, and hey, wasn't that something? A book, no matter how inspired you are, no matter how fast you can type, and I type pretty fast, still going to take some time to do it, man. And it
Yep.
took me, the better part of 5 years to get it all done.
Right. Right. Right.
So it really was independent of the record and of it was its own thing. And I have to say, what really got me to finally dive in and do it after thinking about it for years was the pandemic, was COVID, and having a year and a half where I wasn't touring, wasn't going in the studio, and like everybody else, I said, well, now what have I always wanted to do? I don't want to bake bread. I
Yep.
don't want to I don't want to go rebuild my carburetor on the car I don't have. So what am I going to do? I don't know. I'll finally write that damn book, and I did, and it really came out pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, that's a common story. In fact, I just interviewed another Steve earlier today, Steve Cropper, and from
Oh,
the Booker T
fantastic.
and the MGs, and he's 82 years old. And I was like, well,
Mm.
what are you doing making this record? He goes, well, the COVID thing came along and everything else to do.
That's great. Yeah, I guess
Yep.
it's pretty common because, I mean, people like, I'm not sure how active Steve's been lately, but I know a lot of my friends who tour all the time because it's just what we do and record and make records constantly.
Yep.
That's our life. And it's not even a matter of, oh, that's how we pay the rent, or it's not a matter of whatever else. It's what we love doing. And all of a sudden it wasn't there. And you were trying to fill in that thrill of creativity, that thrill of coming up with something that excites you, and also that way of connecting to people and things like that. So, it's funny to think about now, and I'm speaking the obvious, and you know it, and I know, and all your listeners know it. But the obvious thing is, when it was happening, we didn't know if it would ever end.
No,
You
that's
know,
true.
it wasn't like, well, you're going to take a year and a half and do something else. It's like, holy cow, this might be the rest of my life. Who
This is
knows?
it.
We just didn't know. So I was like, well, a long-term project that actually I would have thought before I don't have time for, I might have a whole lot of time for this.
Yeah, yeah.
And, in that time I was off the road, I got the first draft of the book
Nice.
finished.
Nice. So, did you kind of write it chronologically from, as far back as you can remember to present time, or how did it work for you?
Yeah, the book spans from the day I was born, from growing up in LA through, learning about music and discovering it as a guitarist, band member, DJ, record store clerk, you name it,
Yeah, all that
and
stuff.
then forming and breaking up the Dream Syndicate. And that's the timeline. It's 1960 to 1988. And
Gotcha.
when I was writing the book, I didn't have a publisher, and I didn't know. I figured, okay, maybe I'll put it out myself someday, but I didn't really know where I was going, and I didn't have a defined timeline in place. It's just like, well, I'm going to keep going until I get to today. But once I brought it, I'd gotten two-thirds of the book written around the time I started shopping it around.
Right.
And the first place I went was Jawbone Press in the UK. And they said, yeah, we'll do that.
Oh,
And that
nice.
was that. And
Yeah.
and they said something that really made me happy. The publisher there, Tom Seabrook, said, I think it'd be best if you stop at 1988 and have something left for part two.
Well, there you
Part
go.
two.
That's all
Oh,
right.
go indeed. Like, okay, I guess you want more of this. So it was kind of exciting, the idea that I didn't have to tell everything that happened in my entire life in
Yep.
the course of one book. It would just a story to tell right here that
Yep.
ends. God, I'm 28 years old when the book ends.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of living
Hopefully
left.
there's something else to talk about.
I
Well, I
think
just
I think
watched
so.
a Paul Simon documentary, a film, and it's like 3.5 hours long, and it
Ah,
ends in like 1989, Rhythm of the Saints or whatever. So
yeah, I want to
30
see that. I
years
haven't
left
seen that
after
yet.
that.
Did you like it?
Yeah, 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 I did. But it was kind of
Yeah.
Paul's version, obviously, of his, he's kind of giving his own side of the story, especially with the Simon and Garfunkel thing. So that's always something to keep in.
Well, that's why you write a book to tell
Exactly.
your side of the story.
Yeah. So what kind of what did you settle in your book? What kind of things did you straighten out that you think were misunderstood or misrepresented in your life?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that the Dream Syndicate, our first album, The Days of Wine and Roses, kind of won everybody over. It
Sure.
was just so universally loved by, I won't say mainstream rock. It wasn't appealing to fans of, Michael Jackson, but as far as like the underground rock scene and rock critics and people who love music and were like us essentially.
Yep.
They loved it, and we loved it, and it was a big love fest. And then we made Medicine Show, which took 5 months to make, and was a very different record. And a lot of people, it's been a misunderstood record. A lot of people really love that record, including me. I think it's a very cool record. But what we were trying to do there and why that record was the way it was has been misunderstood for a long time. So I was glad to kind of really explain, fill in the gaps, tell,
Right.
this is why the band you loved became this other band in the course of a year and a half. And I kind of
Right.
laid that all out. So that was one thing.
Uh-huh.
And then also, like anybody who's like Paul Simon with his buddy Art, and like other people who have had interpersonal relationships in music, everybody in a band, and for that matter, people in any relationship, let's face it, love relationship, work relationship, everybody's had that person or people in their life where they parted ways in kind of an unpleasant fashion.
Yeah.
And I guess when you write a book, you can tell your side of that story. So I kind of I think I was very fair. I don't think I was, I actually, I'm as unfair with myself as anybody, but I kind of can say, well, this is why that happened. And I can say to Paul Simon, oh, come on, bury the hatchet with Art Garfunkel. He's an okay guy, but I'm not Paul Simon and I wasn't there.
Yeah.
So he could say, no, Steve, you're wrong, and here's why. And I say,
Yeah.
thank you, Paul. I appreciate that.
Yep, yep, yeah. That's a good way to put it. Very diplomatic.
Yeah,
Now, getting back to the new record, so it starts out with a song called Santa Monica, which is where you were born and raised. Is that correct?
that's right.
Driving down on the PCH, headphones on and I'm feeling great. Radio tells the story as we go. Soundtrack from another time, faded words and busted rhymes. The things we left behind in Santa Monica.
I was fortunate to grow up. I was born in 1960, and
Uh-huh.
and that means I was 4 years old when the Beatles hit America. So, from my earliest age, I was experiencing on some level, on some, the basic level of 4-year-old experience, I was experiencing the thrill of something going on.
Yeah.
And we had, growing up in Los Angeles, we had great radio and great record stores. I mean, it was the center of the music business. So going along with that, you're going to have great ways to experience music. Eventually, I would see a lot of shows, but even as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, I could go to the coolest stores and find all the records I want and flip on my AM radio, transistor radio, and hear all this great music.
Yep.
And it really kind of won me over. And that was it's been as detailed in the book. I would say it's charmed life as far as when I discovered key important timeline touchstones of music, being 4 when the Beatles came to America and being 17, leaving home, independent, having a car, out in the world when punk rock hit.
Yep.
Experiencing the punk rock explosion as somebody who could experience it, who could go out and say, I couldn't quite drink. I'm not sure how it is in New Zealand, but you got to be 21 here to do that.
It shifts back and forth, but 18 to 21.
Does it? Yeah. Same here back then,
Yeah.
state to state,
Yeah.
but in California. So, but that wasn't what I was in it for anyway.
Yeah.
I wasn't into music for girls or for booze or things like that. I was just obsessed with music.
Yeah.
And what a great time to be getting your wings of independence, to be out there saying, all right, I got my own little pad with three other guys, and we're sitting around, barely squeaking by on the rent, but we're saving enough money to buy the new Clash single, that's for sure.
Right. There you go. Well, yeah. And did you have, because growing up in Rochester, New York, where I was, there was a place called the House of Guitars, and there was a guy named Greg Prevost there he's about my age, but he was behind the counter selling 45s. He went on to be the Chesterfield Kings, which is a band of contemporary of you guys. And so I was wondering if there was somebody like that or a situation like that that helped you connect with all that stuff and discover the new things that were happening.
There was. And by the way, Rochester, what a great place to, grow up, because there was like the whole House of Guitars scene and great, burgeoning garage scene and all of that. The you had that great diner there with the mess, with the breakfast, with that something mess.
Nick Tahoe's, the garbage plate.
Yeah, the garbage plate. That's
Everybody
it.
loves the garbage plate.
I had it one time, and then
that's all you need.
I only need to have it one time. I know, right? I only need it one time.
I had it.
That was
well.
something. Still working it off. But yeah, and a big part of the book is every scene, or if you're lucky, every life and music has that person who turned you around.
Yep.
And I've had a few in my life, and I still do, often, luckily. But the one big one in the book and in that part of my life was another DJ at the radio station at UC Davis, where I was going to school, and also on the DJing at the station, a guy named Tom Grasick, and he's still a friend. And he was my roommate, and he was the guy. He was 2 years older than I was, very cocky and arrogant in his feeling that he knew what was good, and he had no time for you if you weren't on board with him. And
Right.
that was very useful because he was into cool stuff. So he was the guy who knew about Ornette Coleman and Albert Ayler, but also knew about the Sex Pistols and the Clash, but also knew about Big Star, but also knew about all these things, the Velvet Underground. And he knew all the things that not everybody knew about. And if you hung out with him, you're going to find out about it too. So he ended up going on for the last 40 years, managing the coolest record store in Los Angeles, a place called Freak Beat Records.
Oh,
so
okay.
he kept doing that. He kept doing that until he retired last year.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing because that story is universal. I just watched a film made about the scene in Christchurch. It's called Head South, about the burgeoning, flying nun thing in 79, 80. And it's exactly the same story. A young kid going to the record store, the guy behind the counter is showing him a Public Image Limited 45, the one with the paper thingy, and a Clash record and whatever. He goes out and finds a bass guitar, and boom, he's suddenly in a band, even though he can't play a note and doesn't know. And there's only
doesn't matter.
Somebody he met the other day. So,
but that is like a universal story, and that's I love the story of the reason Mick Jagger and Keith Richards had a band together is because Mick Jagger has some cool blues records, and Keith saw them at the train station and said, "Where'd you get that?"
Yep.
Big Bill Brunsey records. Well, that was good enough to forge a friendship. And that's really true. I love the story that that John Lennon and George Harrison became friends because George Harrison knew a guitar chord that nobody else knew, or something. So these kinds of things meant a lot, especially in pre-internet days. Back then, somebody in your town
is like secret knowledge.
That person was invaluable. And still, like I say, things are different, and you could say better or worse, and there's pros and cons. But it is now so much easier to find that somebody. It might just be some fan in Somalia or Christchurch or Oslo or whatever, and you find that guy. It's like that guy's got a blog, and he's on. It's easier to find that, and it was kind of fun when you had to really seek it out. But I try not to yield to nostalgia too often, because things were great then. Things were great in the '60s. Things were great 500 years ago, maybe. I don't know. A lot of Gregorian chants were very hip. I don't know.
Now, jumping to the end of the album, you have a tune called Roosevelt Avenue, which is kind of where you're living these days. And
Yeah.
it's about 7 minutes long, and it's very, very, to my ears, very Lou Reedy. So what was
All
going
right.
on there?
Like that.
I'm looking for a new deal. Some kind of way to make it right. I got a WPA legally in my sights. A long walk down
Roosevelt Avenue is the main drag, the main thoroughfare in Queens, New York, where I live. I was just there a sec before I talked to you.
Right.
It's half a block down from me, and I live in Queens, and people who don't spend a lot of time in New York, or even people who do, don't know Queens and think, oh, it must be the suburbs, or maybe they think the TV show All in the Family or something like that,
Yeah.
And Queens, especially Roosevelt Avenue at night, when I finish talking to you and go out to go get a slice of pizza or something like that, it is jumping 24 hours a day. It is, and it's everything. If you imagine Times Square in the time of Taxi Driver,
Right.
it's kind of still going on here on Roosevelt Avenue.
Were the
For better or
Ramones
for
from
worse.
Queens, or did that
They
just
are.
rhymed with refried beans?
And you are so correct. And you're right. Not only that, the along with Simon, let's go back to we keep going back to Simon and Garfunkel and the Ramones went to the same high school, Forest Hills High School. And
Right.
Forest Hills is one neighborhood over from me here in Queens.
Nice.
So, I could walk over to their high school, by the time the sun goes down.
Yep.
And yeah, so they're great. And the Ramones, the New York Dolls, the Johnny Thunders was from Queens, Kiss, and Gene Simmons went to junior high school on my block up the street. But there's a real good music history here, and it is anyway. It is a very decadent, wild nightlife kind of place, and so I
Yep.
wrote that song, kind of reflecting not only lyrically but also sonically what it feels like to be out on Roosevelt Avenue at 2 in the morning.
Yeah, very cool. And did Eric Ambel produce the record with you? This one?
He produced Santa Monica, the song.
Oh,
and then
okay,
he
just the
helped,
song.
and then he helped me tidy up the rest of the record. All the other stuff that had been recorded a little before,
Right.
it all passed through me and Eric, kind of putting it together, remastering, sequencing, fixing this and that, adding a few things here and there. So he was the kind of the last step along the way.
Yeah. And you got Mike Mills and Vicky Peterson and a few other people.
Yeah.
I don't know the specific credits of everything. I've listened to the whole album, but I don't know who's doing what. So if you can shed any light on that, because I know some of them you work with the baseball project, which I think is in progress right now, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, in fact, I'll be putting out the detailed credits on my website probably next month.
Okay.
Fire Records, my label, and we didn't want to get too deep into the idea that this record's from different sessions, because then it doesn't get the same weight, which is, true and sad. I was talking to a friend of mine today, another big music fan, and we were talking about how all these great Dylan records and Rolling Stones records and all kinds of great records actually came from different sessions and were sort of pieced together. A lot
Yep.
of movies are that way too. Things kind of pulled together from different things, and that's great. But I didn't want to do anything to give the record less weight by saying it's a collection, because it's not really. It all ties in with the book. So the people that are mentioned on the sticker and all that are on different songs. Mike Mill, actually, the opening track, Santa Monica, is where all the stars are hanging out. That's
Okay.
that's Mike Mills and Vicky Peterson and John Cowsill and
Yeah.
Eric Roscoe Amble and my wife Linda, all on
Yeah.
that track. So that's
Yeah,
kind of
Yeah.
loaded up on that one.
It's interesting because it's like take an album like Exile on Main Street. The legend is around it was all recorded in France with they had to exile from the UK, but lots of that stuff was done in LA, mixed down and blah 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 and
I know.
all that stuff, but that doesn't fit in with the narrative that everybody wants to believe, right?
You're right. You're so right. In fact, I was really disappointed when I found that out. Like, oh, Mick just went and sang the whole thing and finished it all up in at Sunset Sound, I think it was in Hollywood. Well, it kind of ruins the decadent, south of France story.
Yep.
Exactly. So, I'm sure at the time that wasn't talked about that much because let's not ruin the mystery.
Yeah. Now you have a tune called Cherry Avenue, which is a moody kind of. It almost sounds like the Doors to me a little bit, and there's a trumpet solo in there. What do you got going on there?
Did you mean everything that you said?
That is a collaboration with and there's another song, that Cherry Avenue and the next song, Then Again,
Mm-hmm.
are both collaborations with a band and a band leader out in LA. The band's called Psychic Temple. I don't know if you're hip to them, but they're a very great band. Do you know them at
I've
all?
heard of them, but I'm not that familiar with them. Yeah.
Man, they're so good. They've made a bunch of great records, and their new one that came out a couple months ago, it's just fantastic. They do kind of, it's a band, but really it's one of those things where it's one guy. It's like the Alan Parsons Project thing, where it's
Yeah,
one guy,
right.
a producer who puts different people together and writes songs and creates these little artworks. And I've just
Yeah.
been a big fan, and we ended up communicating. And he had an idea at one point to have a mashup, a session with his band and the Dream Syndicate in the studio together. So we did that, and we recorded 5 songs, and he put out some of them, and I put out these 2 songs on my record from that session. Oh, if you're, I really, it's called I forgot, it's a long title. I got it right up here. I was just listening to it. Oh yeah, Doggy Paddling Through the Cosmic Consciousness. That's what I can't remember.
Okay, that's
It's
fair enough.
it's a hell of a record. It's really, really good.
All right, very cool. Now I gotta. Once you've written, now that you've written your memoir, did you learn anything about yourself from the process?
Yeah, I did. I think it's inevitable. You're going to find out things about yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, one thing I took away from writing the book, and it's something I hadn't thought about before, but it's really true and very typical for when you're young, for anybody who's, kind of figuring things out. Throughout the book, there are a lot of relationships with people that I sever and move on to something else. And I don't bother to sit down and have a cup of coffee or a beer and talk it out. It's like, well, I'm moving on now.
Yeah.
And other people do the same. And I don't do that anymore. I think now when something goes awry or something isn't working out, I'll at the very least say, hey, what the hell's going on here? What is something on your mind? You want, then
Yep, yep.
but I did learn that's a recurring theme in the book where, okay, I'm done here.
Yeah.
This is done. I'm not the only one who's done that, but as I wrote it and read it back, a lot of times I thought, God, I should have given that person a little more time to see what could have been salvaged or have a diplomatic breakup.
Yep.
But say la vie. I'm
Say
here
la
now.
Yeah, the old kid. Yep. And are you thinking about what you're going to do music wise next? What do you got
So
on the
many
cards?
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky these days because I've got my solo shows, and especially with the book and the record and the baseball project, which we mentioned, we're busier than ever and really, having a nice little moment here in the States. And then the Dream Syndicate's on this nice little 10-year run. We've been cranking out records and playing all the time. And I'm hoping to get the band over to Australia and New Zealand
We'd love to have
in
you.
the fall of 25.
Yeah.
Yeah, we played there in 86 in
Right.
one show in Auckland.
Yeah. Yeah.
And had a great- I mean-
I had Sid Griffin from the Long Riders who was trying to get
Great.
gigs here as well. You should do a double bill, and they can't resist.
Well, it'd be good because Stephen McCarthy of the Long Riders is essentially a member of the Dream Syndicate.
Well,
at
there
this
you go.
point, so
A deal
there you go,
done.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. And you're doing like one-man shows right now, right? Because I see you booked one in Buffalo where you're just doing songs and stories.
That's right.
What is that going to be like what is it like for you and for the audience?
It's going to be really fun. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about it. Normally, when I play my solo shows, which I do quite often these days, look, I've got a lot of songs. I've got, about 400 songs I've released. So
Yeah.
generally, when I play a solo show, I don't think about it much. I just put together a set list half hour before the show, and I go out and just freeform it. I just kind of say, okay, I'm gonna see what works and what doesn't, and play along. This show, I want to have a little more structure where I'm kind of telling a version of the story of the book. with songs.
Yeah.
And I can tell some of the stories in the book, some stories that aren't in the book, but use the songs to illustrate. Like, well, why tell you about this? I've got my guitar. I'll show you where
Yep.
I stole that song from and how I did that thing, and we'll do it together. So it'll be a little bit of something between a professor, stand-up comedian, troubadour, and book critic all at the same time.
Nice one. That sounds cool. Yeah. All righty. Well, I think we covered everything. This is excellent. Yeah. So hopefully you can get on down here at some time. We'd love to see you, and we'll take.
I'd love to. I tell you something, I remember so well. We flew into Auckland, I think, in time for sound check.
Yeah.
Played the show and left the next morning. So
Yeah.
I was not there. I walked around a little bit. That was it. It's not fair.
I believe it. Very good.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, have a great day. Thank you very much.
You too.
All right.
Pleasure talking to you.
You too. Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this episode of the 13th Floor's Music Talk series, please be sure to subscribe to the website or to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram and wherever you find your podcasts. There's a whole lot more to discover.